Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around we're doing television and streaming services, whatever you want to call it. The media has changed, but we know what we mean when we say both of those things. And because I'm older than oxygen, I was thinking back to when I first got a TV in our household when I was a small kid. And it was profoundly life-changing for the grown-ups and the kids. You had a storyteller in the lounge room. And it wasn't just a drunk old uncle telling you stuff about the war. It was a window to the world. It was a window to news. It was a window to stories. And when I was prowling around the shelves trying to find a television series that I was going to recommend for this video, I thought of that idea of having a storyteller in the lounge room. Of course, we expanded that. We have televisions in the bedroom. I've got one in the man cave. We've got phones that we can even take when we go to perform our ablutions. So the medium has changed. But that idea of having something that is telling us stories in a personalised way and in a way where we can select the stories that are told to us is a profound change in the way human beings interact with one another and interact and communicate. So I just held that thought while I was looking at these, and I thought what a wonderful thing it is to be able to have something telling us stories, showing us things, and unfortunately lying to us in the house. Younger generations would always have had that, but for me it was something that at one stage we didn't have it, and then we did have it. That gives me something of a different perspective on those things. And even though that storytelling Black Mirror that we have has become a Pandora's box with all of the evils of the world flooding over us constantly and enabling us to doom scroll them, the thing to remember is at the bottom of Pandora's box was hope. And I hope we keep telling each other stories and we keep showing each other new things. And we get better and better at discerning the lies and misinformation that those little storytellers in the corner of the lounge room have been telling us. So let's get started with 10 series that I recommend. A couple of them are problematic, by the way, because of the creators of them, but I still think that the series themselves are interesting. I'm going to go back to this one from the 1960s, which was controversial in Australia, even though it was incredibly popular with kids, because it was a Japanese animation. And at the stage we were about 20 years from the Kokoda Trail and the Changi Jail and all of the atrocities of World War II. But Australian kids took to anime like nothing before. We loved it. We watched everything we could possibly get that was Japanese. The TV stations obviously could get cheap product from Japan, dubbed. That, of course, helped them. But kids as an audience in the 1960s really loved Japanese stuff, and we could never get enough of it. And one of them was a series about a kid who can breathe underwater, Marine Boy. Marine Boy works for the Underwater Patrol. He has a special chewing gum called Oxygum, which he chews a chewing gum and he can breathe underwater, which is kind of cool. I always wanted Oxygum. And the other thing I wanted was a pair of Marine Boy's boots, which have propellers on them. So you could dive in the water and your boots would propel you around. He also had an electric boomerang, which I would have found useful when I was being bullied at school. But Marine Boy was great. It had a terrific theme song. He had a girlfriend, a topless mermaid. You never got to see boobs. It wasn't that kind of show. And I managed to get the first season of Marine Boy on DVD. It's got that basic 1960s Japanese animation, which I love. And when I first watched this, I couldn't watch it in colour because we didn't have colour TV till 1975. I have a passionate love for Marine Boy, and I can appreciate that the internationalism of showing a Japanese show. And it was the start of many multicultural things which have enriched my viewing ever since. All of it came from this, and that Japanophilia that came from a series like Marine Boy. There were a whole bunch of other ones. There was Prince Planet, there was Astro Boy, of course. There was Princess Knight, there was The Amazing Three. There were tons of them that hit the Australian markets. And I thought I'd start with Marine Boy because I just have that passionate love for that era of Japanese animation. Next to a Joss Whedon series, and I know Joss Whedon's problematic, and the fact that he was pretending to be a feminist when he was treating women very badly is something we can't really ignore. But I do like Firefly. I think the world building on Firefly, having a space western where the good guys are the underdogs and the bad guys are the corporate fascists, is a kind of timely thing now. I only went 17 episodes. I was shown out of sequence. There was a sequential narrative that was ignored by the people releasing it at the time. But it's got a cult following ever since. And that cult following is as much about the actors as it is about the fact that Joss Whedon created it. Nathan Fillion, Miranda Baccarat, and all the rest of them really built an interesting ensemble in an interesting world-building effort to make a space western. And I like Firefly. I even like Serenity, the movie, even though it does have a few too many jump scares. The series and the movie are great, and I'm going to put aside the fact that the man who created them was a prick. Interesting science fiction, interesting world building. Would have liked to have seen more of it. The other one, which is even more problematic, and I haven't even taken these out of the plastic yet, are the 2 seasons of a weird series created by Joss Whedon called Dollhouse. There's season 1, and there's season 2. And it ends very apocalyptically and dystopianly. It stars Elijah Dushku, and it says, as an active, the mysterious Echo serves as an unwilling agent to Dollhouse, an illegal underground organisation that provides its elite clients with programmable human beings. Actives receive personality imprints, allowing them to temporarily become anyone or anything. The perfect burglar, spy, lover, or assassin. Now, with the FBI and her own shadowy past closing in, Echo must face a rogue active who will stop at nothing to bring Dollhouse down forever. So it's an interesting concept, problematic as hell because of that involuntary brainwashing in the sense. But that makes it edgier and darker than it would be otherwise. And I don't mind watching Dollhouse. I think that even though there are lots of aspects to this series that's uncomfortable, I don't think the science fiction should always just be comfortable. And one of the things that makes this series more interesting is it's a window into the dark side of its creator's mind. And there are aspects to this series which have been illuminated by the evidence provided by the women with whom Whedon interacted during his career and his personal life. So that makes it dark and interesting. I mean, it's not going to be for everybody. It's not going to be a series that everybody can watch without it causing them harm and damage and depressing them. But I still think it's an interesting science fiction series with all of those provisos that I mentioned. Let's go to something just a little bit lighter. This was a 1-season thing by Steve Coogan. It's a love letter to Hammer horror films. It's a little thing called Dr. Terrible's House of Horrible, where Steve Coogan plays the frame story narrator of a bunch of portmanteau anthology horror things. I'll give you the titles of the episodes just to give you a feel for it. First one is And Now the Fearing, London 1972, when a property developer, an architect and a feminist art critic are trapped in a high-rise lift. Their dreams turn to nightmares. The second one was called Frenzy of the Tongs, Limehouse 1911. Gentleman adventurer Nathan Blaze locks horns with Hang Ma Chang, the sinister, bony-fingered menace from the east. So that's obviously Terror of the Tongs. Curse of the Blood of the Lizard of Doom. I'm not even going to try to explain that one. Lesbian Vampire Lovers of Lust. I might watch that one first. Voodoo Feet of Death. And Scream Satan Scream, which is a fantastic title. I love that title. Yeah, it's just a lot of fun, and it's a pastiche of all of those Hammer and, to a certain extent, Amicus anthology horror things, and also of standalone movies that Hammer and Amicus and other people put out in the 1960s. There are a few extras on it, but I just love that kind of stuff. As much as I love the Hammer and Amicus stuff, I'm not adverse to it being satirized, and this one does it really interestingly. It was a 1-season thing, but I love Dr. Terrible's House of Horrible. It's a lot of fun. If you can find it, you're going to have a good time with it, especially if you know Hammer and Amicus fairly well. Next up, I've got 3 seasons of a series from about 10 or 12 years ago that I really enjoyed. Penny Dreadful. Set in Victorian England, it has Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, all of the classic horror movie characters. And it stars Eva Green, Timothy Dalton, Rory Kinnear, Billy Piper, Josh Hartnett, and Harry Treadaway. Really great stuff. Very, very confronting. You see it's got an R rating on there, so it's not for the faint of heart. But the 3 seasons of Penny Dreadful are a really interesting watch and have some really solid acting in them as well. There's demons, there's all sorts of supernatural stuff within the context of Victorian England. They still hold up well, and I like the fact that they went so hard on the blood, guts, gore, nudity and transgressiveness in Penny Dreadful. It was a series made in the UK, and I don't think it's a series that America would have made. There are certain cultural taboos in America that meant that this kind of a series wouldn't have been made in America. But Penny Dreadful is great. Eva Green is fantastic in this one. She has a character arc that you rarely see even in this kind of a horror series. So that's a recommend from me as well. It reinterprets all the classics. There's a Jekyll and Hyde thing there. An interesting iteration of Frankenstein. It's just a lot of good horror stuff in that series. Next one's a rarity. It's an Australian spy series from the 1960s that Crawford Productions put out, and you can only get the DVDs from Crawford Productions. It's a series called Hunter, starring Tony Ward, Gerard Kennedy, Fernanda Glynn, and a whole bunch of other Australian actors. One of the best things about Hunter as a series is there was a lot of location shooting. Some of it was in Singapore, some was in Sydney, and most was in Melbourne. And there's a lot of location shooting in Melbourne in the 1960s in non-city areas. And a lot of that stuff wasn't incredibly well documented, cinematically or photographically even, at the time. So watching car chases through Port Melbourne, which is now a very posh area, when it was all tiny little cottages and factories, is really interesting for anybody who knows Melbourne. Hunter, I recommend a lot. There are some extras in there, and there isn't a complete episode list of the series, which went on for about 3 or 4 years. But it was a good, solid Australian spy series. Moved Australian television drama forward at the time. There are some of the characters. Tony Ward, who plays Hunter, the lead character, went on to become a banana farmer in Queensland. There you go. But that one, you can get it from Crawford Productions. Just type in Crawford Productions into Google and you'll find it. If you're into Australian television, you can't go past Hunter. While we're staying on this side of this clay and granite planet, this is a series set in the 1920s about a female detective called Franny Fisher, Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries. The ABC put these out. They're based on the novels by Kerry Greenwood, who is a lovely person. She really knows her history. She set this in the 1920s. Franny Fisher, her detective, is a woman who worked in World War I against the Germans, came back to Australia, found out she had become wealthy, and uses her wealth to try to help people. So there are a whole bunch of different episodes in here with different mysteries in it that give a 1920s historical context. They're all set in Melbourne or in Victoria. The novels are great. If you can find Kerry Greenwood's novels, they're really interesting stuff. I found these for $2 each. They're just the 2 parts of season 2. But they're a lot of fun. She's an outrageous, over-the-top character, played by Essie Davis. Good supporting cast of Australian actors. If you can find them, you're going to have a good time with them. Next up, we've got a whole bunch of one-season things. Peacemaker, written and directed by James Gunn. It was James Gunn's calling card to DC when he took over running DC. We're waiting on his Superman movie, but Peacemaker Season 1 is fantastic fun. John Cena's a great comic actor. Supporting cast is a lot of fun. Pet Eagle Eagly is a lot of fun. His father's played by Robert Patrick from Terminator 2. Twists and turns and a really weird alien menace as well. But Peacemaker is hilarious and gory and a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed watching it. And there is going to be a season 2 which hasn't come out yet, and I will look forward to that as well. Just a fun superhero thing which has the right tone for keeping me amused. This next one's an anthology of television plays by Nigel Neal. Came out in the 1970s. Each of the stories is different and they're creepy as hell. Beasts. Like I said, there are 7 different stories with no connection between them, but it is a very dark anthology series, which has some very bold concepts. I mean, there's a water park being haunted by the ghost of a dolphin, and a whole bunch of other things in there as well. Really interesting, good acting in it. This is a series that's willing to go crazy, and each of the different stories is unique, and each of the stories really lands and is not quite like anything you've ever seen before. If you haven't seen Beast, pick up a copy of it. It was distributed by Network and they're no longer around. But if you look around, you can find them on eBay and even maybe Facebook Marketplace if you are in the Northern Hemisphere on that island off the coast of Europe. But that one's a high recommend from me. Not quite like anything else you've ever seen. This was a one-season HBO series which has got a lot of criticism because the star of it, Jonathan Majors, has turned out to not be a nice person. You can look up the details of that if you want to. It also stars Journey Smollett, Courtney B. Vance, Michael Kenneth Williams, Abby Lee. It's based on the novel Lovecraft Country, and of course it is Lovecraft Country, which is hard to say for some reason. About black people travelling across America and coming up against Lovecraftian monsters. Part of it is social commentary about 20th century America. Part of it is Lovecraftian monsters. The acting and the characterizations of the characters is great. The arc of the characters is fantastic. It's just such a pity that the lead actor turned out to be an unworthy person in so many ways. Nonetheless, Lovecraft Country is a great series. It's a pity it didn't go to season 2, but I totally understand why it didn't. That one I can recommend if you can find a copy of it around. But again, it's got that problematic aspect to it, as indeed do a lot of things these days. Just like there's a lot of Neil Gaiman stuff that's being cut short because of Neil Gaiman revealing himself to be a wrong one. That one I recommend in spite of that lead actor. Down to the last two, both from the UK. This is such a deep cut. Network put it out. It was a short-run series, a surrealistic spy series about the bureaucracy of being a spy.
You're not going to like this.
Then you'll probably enjoy telling me.
One of your dead men turned up. Dead.
Which one?
Whitebait.
Somebody shot him.
Where?
On a bench. In the park.
Second killing there in the week.
And what have you done about it?
We thought of moving the bench.
Oh, shut up, Sergeant.
Yes, sir.
Part of it feels like Joe Orton. It's a mad series done on a very small budget called The Corridor People. It's hard to describe what this is. It's got to be experienced. It only ran about 6 episodes in 1966. But I love it. Once you get the ear for the dialogue and once you get your mind into the world of this series, you're going to have a good time with it. It's only on one disc, but it came out at the time of Spy Mania and Bond Mania. But it's very different from anything else in the spy realm. But it's mad fun. I've watched this twice now and enjoyed it enormously both times. If you can find a copy of this, you're going to have a good time with it. But again, it may take you an episode or two just to get your head around it. That is not a bad thing. Last one, swashbuckling Victorian adventurer gets frozen and wakes up in the swinging London of 1966. Adamant lives. Great theme song by Kathy Kirby. Stars Gerard Harper as Adamant, Victorian adventurer who is frozen by his enemy and wakes up in the 1960s. That's a deal with 60 years of change in the world, but also villainy as well. He's got a sword cane, he's got a cape. A lot of fun, this one. It's got a little bit of the feel of the Avengers TV series, but nonetheless, it is something of its own. Not all of the episodes are on here because some of them have been lost, unfortunately. But you've got enough to give you the full flavour of the series. There's the back cover with a bit more of the photography from it. Who put this one out? BBC put it out on DVD. Madman put it out in Australia. I'm a bit surprised they got an Australian release. But if you find a copy of Adamant Lives, you're going to have a good time. It's kind of like Austin Powers, except previous generation. Austin Powers came from the 1960s to the 2000s. Adamant came from 60 years earlier and may well have been an influence on Austin Powers. So that's what I got for you. All sorts of weird and wonderful stuff. Again, some of the people involved are problematic, and I fully acknowledge that. And I would understand why you wouldn't watch this stuff if you chose not to. Everybody draws their own line in different places, and I respect that. What I don't respect is when people criticize where people draw the line for themselves. But anyway, there's so much good stuff that came from television. And it brings me back to that fact that I still find the fact that we've got television and we've got stories being told to us by technology. That still amazes me and still delights me when I think about it. It's something that I don't want to take for granted. It's something that I don't want to ever lose my love for. So let me know which series you would select and whether you like any of these or whether you've seen any of these or whether you want to see any of these. Tons of good stuff there. Lots of fascinating things to explore. I didn't even touch on a lot of the animated stuff that I love from the 1960s. So that's what I got for you this time. A whole bunch of random stuff and that I think is worth watching. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, give it a thumbs up. Doesn't cost you anything to subscribe, so subscribe to it, leave a comment as well. It all helps the channel with the algorithm. You can also support the channel by becoming a channel member, by donating through YouTube, or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/terrytalksmovies. All the people who are channel members or patrons got an extra video yesterday, which I'm releasing to the main channel in 2 weeks, which was a bit of a sad story, but I'm saving that one for the main channel for 2 weeks to give the people who donate to the channel just that little bit of breather. Next up, I've got Science Fiction Saturday, and I know what I'm doing for Science Fiction Saturday, which is a nice change. Then we go back into the week and the usual rotation. So until all of that happens, watch some good TV, watch some bad TV, watch some problematic TV, and hiss at the villains. And I'll catch you next time.